Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Cutting Edge podcast, brought to you by ourselves here at Landell. Delighted to have with me today not just the one guest. The first time we've got the two guests on. Brendan Perrin, I'll ask you to kind of give a bit of an introduction to yourself shortly. But prior to that, let me introduce everyone to the man, the myth, the I'm not going to call him the legend, but he's behind these podcasts and the ideas of this, and that's Matthew Sill. Matt, do you want to give yourself a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I'm Matthew, marketing manager here at Landell Services, and I ultimately support the sales team and other departments, you could say, with, I guess, growth of the business, events, lead generation, lots of different things. So, excited to be here, Jason, and to be involved in this conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, mate. And now we go on to the real legend.
Yeah.
So Brendan, I know you. Matt knows you. You know both of us. And that's to do with our association and our membership with the IPIA. But if I can ask you to just give an introduction to yourself. I know that most of the viewers and listeners will recognise you, but if they don't, perhaps you can introduce yourself, who the IPIA are, and a little bit of a background as to what you do.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks very much for hosting me on the podcast. It's great to be here. I am the general manager of the Independent Print Industries Association, the IPIA. And the IPA really started back in 1992 officially, although it was formed much earlier than that, in sort of the mid-'80s in a loose fashion. But over the course of its history, it's massively evolved and adapted. It was formerly in the business forms market, and then about 2000 it evolved into commercial print. Since then, we've now evolved to cover wide format print, commercial print, packaging, labeling, and the whole kind of supply chain. And really, we do four key things for our members. One is, much like a cooperative, we leverage the size of the association to negotiate a whole series of member benefits that can help our members reduce their overheads. Oh. From everything from 24-hour access to legal services through to credit checking and debt collection, carbon footprinting, and so forth. Two is that we incentivize our members to network and come together and collaborate. We run a series of physical events every year, 4 physical events every year, and 4 virtual events every year that each is designed to help our members and the wider industry come together, network, learn, share business intelligence, build partnerships, and then the third thing that we do is market our members' businesses. So we've got a very well-developed publishing channel with our magazine, our printed magazine, our news hub, our social media presence, our newsletter, and members are able to publicize their products and services and brand through those channels. And the fourth thing that we do, which is potentially the most important, is we're very much focused on growing the pie, this industry for everyone. Yeah. Because it's great us talking to ourselves, and we need to do that. But if we don't grow this industry for the long term, then in 10 years, there'll be no point in us existing. Yeah. So that's our big focus. And we do that through direct government advocacy, both to central government, the Department for Business and Trade, but also through a series of major advocacy and print marketing programs to help raise awareness about the effectiveness of our industry's products and services. So, yeah, that's us in a nutshell.
Very good. And if I just go back on a couple of bits that you mentioned there, I mean, our membership, which has been probably approaching the first year now, we're a relatively new business into this market space, and a new business that's become a member of the IPIA, come about on the back of conversations and discussions that we had over at Drooper last year, and the fact that as a business, we're focused on the fact that we are very much independent of manufacturer of digital hardware or finishing solutions themselves, and so that there was a real synergy there with what we do. On the back of that initial membership, we've seen firsthand. Matt, you were fortunate enough to be to play at one of the 4 events that you say you host sort of face to face each year, which was the golf day at the Belfry, sponsored by ourselves at Landell, and also Canon, just to say there are other manufacturing brands available before anyone says anything different.
Completely independent.
Showing our independent consultancy approach. But Matt, I don't know if you want to add a little bit around how that day was and the type of thing that...
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was a fantastic. It was great to spend the day playing golf in the beautiful sunshine at the Belfry. Lovely course to play on. But it was a great networking opportunity as well. As an event, it was very relaxed. It was great to see as well. I think a range of ages, that it wasn't perhaps you're more experienced. There were perhaps some younger talent coming into the industry. I thought the event was well worth it, and I'm looking forward to being invited to the next one over Jason.
Right, and that connects us very, very well into how we're going to start the podcast in a bit more detail. As part of this series of podcasts, we're asking our guests to ask a question for the next guest that's going to be on. And I've been out the last couple of days actually with somebody who's joined our team, who's a sort of fresh from education. From school, and a conversation I've been having with a lot of my customers and potential customers over the last few years is that this is an aging sort of industry, and I'm a lot of the people that I compete against, I'm kind of one of the youngest, and it's a bit frightening to think that. So there is definitely an opportunity to try to get some young blood into the industry. And the question that was asked at our last podcast by Gavin Blakemore from Plockmatic, he asked, what would you suggest, or what do you think we can do to try to encourage the next generation, if you like, into this industry?
Well, first of all, thanks for that, Gav. Me and Gav are good friends, and that's a super easy question to start off with. So I think if we look at the hard reality of this, the print industry at one time, not that long ago, 20 years ago, still had a pretty much industrialized program to bring the next generation into our industry. Through apprenticeships, schools, colleges, specific university courses.
Postgrad schemes.
Then, to cut long story short, you then had the massive digital boom. Everyone got excited by the bright, shiny baubles on the tree.
Yeah.
And huge amounts of higher education institutions and the central government decided that print was old-fashioned and pulled the plug on huge numbers of this, and it all really imploded. So what it then left was manufacturers, OEMs, and it really spurred a huge amount of development towards automation, because quite early on, a lot of the OEMs realized that they could no longer rely on having machinery that took huge amounts of technical knowledge and skill to run. So you ended up with green button philosophy, where now you need, a couple of days training to run one of these machines. As long as you can use a computer and you actually have, enough fingers on your hand, you can literally press go, and that's it. So that then kind of ate its own tail a little bit, because you then have a situation where you don't actually need all of those apprenticeships and training programs and everything else that are out there exposing the next generation to print and bringing them in. So it was a solution to a problem that was critical and necessary, but it has then left us without the need for these high-level training programs. Yep. I think the solution is already happening, and there are lots of good initiatives in lots of different places. If I look at initiatives that some of our fellow trade associations have going, PyCon has a very well-developed initiative in this area with its members to incentivize the recruitment of the next generation and provide payback for that. The BPIF has a very well-developed training program. For us, our most direct experience in this area was that we were a government gateway for the Kickstart scheme. And we were actually one of the first 5 gateways in the United Kingdom to get onto that scheme during COVID. Just to remind everyone quickly, that was where you could effectively bring someone between 18 and 24 into your business, and the government would pay their wages for 6 months. Yep. And then you got a £2,500 grant towards training, equipment, and whatever to support them. Now, what that told us, by the end of that, we had 180 people in that demographic. I had placed them in jobs in the printing industry. Out of those 180, today, over 90 are still in full employment in the print industry and have been promoted. So they started off somewhere. Now, what that tells me is that our industry has no issue with young people enjoying our industry. We've got over a 50% retention rate from that cohort. And they got involved, they got engaged, they moved on up in those companies. And talking to a lot of them today, they are more involved than ever and want to progress and want to stay in this industry for the rest of their career. So we don't have an issue with our industry being exciting to be in. It's just how do we expose it? I'd point to a program, Young People in Print, that's actually headed up by one of our council members, Elizabeth Bauman. She's built that initiative off her own back, got a lot of people involved and interested in it. It's really important, and they've already done their first nationwide outreach to schools, colleges, getting printers to open their doors and do tours of their factories to just expose. But where we need to get to is, if you look at something like the Pharmaceutical Association, their budget is something like £500,000 a year. They have a single part of their organization that is responsible for exposing the next generation to the pharmaceutical industry and all the ephemera of jobs that are in it. Because they faced a crisis about 10 years ago because they saw a slump in young people coming in. They've solved that now. They've got a great supply of the next generation coming in, but that's the kind of funding level that is required. And they are in every single university, giving lectures at every secondary school. They're at every jobs fair across the nation, making sure that their industry is up in lights and seen as an opportunity. So that's where we need to get to.
Thank you for that answer to that question. Very, very detailed. In terms of, you mentioned earlier automation, which is a key thing. So we all know that automation is a bit of a buzzword, along with sustainability, those sorts of things within this industry. But I think something which would be add real value to ourselves, but also the people that are watching or listening, would be any other industry sort of trends, statistics that you might be able to share with us. Because obviously, coming from an independent standpoint, I think that's something that would give our viewers and listeners some real things to sort of take away and at least consider.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that the single biggest macro trend, if we look within our industry, is that we are seeing the strong development of a hybrid model for print.
Yep.
So when I joined the industry in 2010, it was very segmented. You had copy shops and small print service providers servicing their local community. Then you had sort of regional trade printers who had bigger capacity and were doing longer run jobs. And yeah, those smaller printers would then outsource some of their longer run stuff up to those sort of regional trade printers. Then you had a few national, really big printers, but weren't really set themselves up as trade. Then you had print management or print brokers into print management and a few marketing agencies. And that was kind of the setup, right? Today, the trend that we have is we have a growing number of very, very large trade print service providers.
Yes. Yeah.
You have the middle ground shrinking and either being bought up by those large trade providers or consolidating into much bigger individual, regional or / national print businesses, still focused on being production-led factories. And then underneath that, you've got quite a big gap where all of those ephemera of hundreds of small printers have now really become hybrid print management. They might have a toner device. They might even still have, a litho device or 2-color litho that they're running on, a couple of runs, or maybe a 4-color device there. But really, they are now, the vast majority of their income and profit generation is from doing all the consultancy with a client base who increasingly knows very little about print, how to design for print, how to set up for print, what's required. They're doing all that consultancy and work, and that's where they're making their profit. But they're outsourcing all of those jobs, unless it's a 24-hour turnaround job or something they really specialize in. They're outsourcing that to a large trade provider.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point that you make. I mean, with all of the different sort of various apps that are available for people to download and to do themselves, everyone's a designer these days, aren't they? the reality is they're not.
Yeah.
And the amount of customers that I speak to that then have to, "I'm really sorry, but this file is incorrect because of X, Y, or Z."
Yeah.
And then even some of the most experienced designers, when we were introducing things like an extra layer to add an additional color, as an example, so a metallic or what have you, to a particular file. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. Something else that I wanted to just touch on as well. So sort of talking about these different types of customers. Do you have all of these types of customers as members of the IPA as well?
Yeah, so the IPA 4 years ago merged with another association called the British Association for Print and Communication. Some people may still remember the name. Very beloved figure in our industry, Sidney Bob, was the chairman of the BAPC for over 30 years, business mentor and personal mentor of mine. He came up for retirement, and the IPA and BAPC was a natural fit because the IPA was mainly the largest trade printers in the country and that middle ground of trade printer. And print management, and then OEMs and suppliers. BAPC was a collection at that point of 400 copy shop, what's once copy shops, that had evolved into becoming marketing agencies, design agencies, and small scale commercial printers.
Yeah.
So all of the Call Quicks, all of the Pronto Prints, etc., are in the BAPC membership, Recognition Express, and so forth. So we have this wonderful sort of thing where we have both of those demographics together.
Yeah, no, that's good. And in terms of us as members as well, you touched on at the start some of the events that we were able to attend. Do you just want to elaborate a little in terms of what a membership might entail or provide to somebody who might decide or reach out to you, Brendan? Contact details will be shared at the end in terms of membership.
Yeah, so I think it depends which part of the market you're from, but what we've built is a kind of movable feast. So no matter which part of the supply chain you're in, there is some significant value for you within the IPA membership. Looking at the events, we have a networking lunch that happens in June. We have our annual conference that happens in August. We've got our golf day. As I said, we've got 4 virtual networking events, and we've got our massive networking lunch expo, gala dinner and awards night in December. And each one of those is designed to bring together that whole supply chain, effectively shake them up, and help them to break down barriers to doing businesses with each other. Yep. Just to give you a very stereotypical example of what could happen, we'll get 3 or 4 print businesses that come together. They're all having a chat over lunch at a networking lunch or whatever. They all realize that they're effectively doing very similar things in not too distant regions from each other, and we'll build up relationships between them because one may have just invested in a significant piece of technology. The other 3 may go, okay, well, instead of us all investing in that same piece of technology, why don't we trade service that out to you? And by the way, you've still got a massive Heidelberg. So why don't we now all send our long-run litho work to you? And you now are having these mini networks of cooperation and collaboration between printers who are sharing their technology and resources for the whole.
Which is all about... Sorry, Matt, go on.
No, I was going to say, do you see that kind of the way... Is that likely the way the industry is probably going to start moving? Do you think there's going to be a lot more collaboration? Do you think that's necessary in order for, I guess, this industry to keep growing? I know you touched on it previously, but is that something... I guess the IPA is incentivizing and encouraging?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the most interesting things for anyone who's, quote unquote, an industry pundit, it needs to be very careful about any predictions they make because our industry evolves, changes, and adapts, and things happen that you wouldn't expect. But that said, I really think that we are going to go more towards a future where you have this especially as software is developed, web to print is developed, automation, workflow means that the barriers to doing that type of collaboration have now come right down. You can get a customer who buys from your portal over in Southport for litho that then gets directly sent through to Norfolk. They can do the work for you. It gets white labeled and sent back, but the brand is still the printer that that came through the portal. So the barriers to that kind of thing happening have come right down. I think it will continue to develop in that way. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know.